And as we look to the upcoming Formula E season, how do you see some of that championship playing out in terms of, it feels like the team dynamic, especially with the Porsche 1-2 in Mexico, kind of, what happened there? I mean, put a Porsche 1-2. That was just, their first win in the sport, right? And then they come with a 1-2, completely mixes up the championship. And then you have De Vries, Mortara, Wehrlein now completely involved, and Van Dorn. It seems so mixed up and hard to predict, but are there any predictions you think you can have for the upcoming Formula E season?
The only prediction I always ever make with Formula E is to predict the unpredictable. Going into this season, I tipped Mercedes EQ to be strong because their powertrain was strong last year, and I think with Van Dorn and De Vries, they have probably one of the strongest lineups. I think Jaguar have just had horrendous luck. They would have had more points than they did, especially I feel bad. Like some Mitch Evans, I'm tipping to be a championship contender after last year and just has no luck there. I think probably my biggest surprise is Venturi. The fact that they've got such an experienced lineup in Mortara and Degrassi. They've also got Jerome D'Ambrosio as the team principal and kind of Susie Wolf in that CEO role. They've got an incredibly experienced and knowledgeable team around them that grasps the need and the concepts in Formula E very well. I think sometimes maybe the team potentially do play a bit more safe. I think Mortara could have got a podium. I don't think they tend to risk things as often. But then say the likes of Porsche, I said this the other day to a friend, is Porsche must think they are in a championship contending position. Otherwise, Lotterer would have fought Wehrlein for that win.
Yeah.
Because I think in his head, he thinks, right, not I'll give him the win, but I won't fight him for it. We'll bring home this 1-2. And at some point in the future, he can return the favour for me. Because if this was Neo, right at the back of the grid, fighting for that win, as much as your team would probably give you team orders and tell you not to fight, odds on somebody probably would, because it's such a shot in the dark. Whereas with Porsche, I think they know if they can get it together on a consistent basis, then they have a shot at it. And that's the problem. Probably the problem and the difficulty for a lot of those teams is just in Formula E, that consistency. I think it'll be more consistent now with the new qualifying format. We won't tend to see as many, I don't want to say road drivers, but those drivers say further towards the back of the grid, popping up the front, when normally they probably wouldn't have done. You'll tend to see probably, I say, a group of about 4 or 5 teams fighting it up the front and the rest kind of fighting below the midfield to the back of the grid. So, yeah, for me, it's just annoying that they've now got a massive break until April. I think they should have had a break sooner because it just feels too long.
I don't mind it because Jack Nicholls has agreed to come on the show because he doesn't have to work now for a month. So I don't mind that they've taken a break, but it's a little bit of a selfish reason. I think it speaks to just the quality of the series that they've been able to build in obviously a relatively short timescale, really. But the tracking of the whole history of Formula E, you can look just the cars, but the viewer numbers, the attendance at the races, I think just the quality of the racing product, the building of the tracks, the track design, all of it has progressed so much, even just like the graphics on the broadcast and just the overall quality of the professionalism almost of the company. It feels like, we touched on Extreme E, if they can mirror that or get a similar kind of growth, provide that real base for electric motorsport, it's really then going to start asking the question more and putting the pressure on Formula One to move potentially even further towards electricity, maybe move down an even bigger battery component in the cars or something like that. I think it's a really interesting angle to follow electric motorsport, because it's almost, they are obviously 2 separate series, but they're part of a similar movement together. And I think there's connections in ownership as well, aren't there, between Extreme E and Formula E, that they are tied together in their messaging in some way.
Completely. Well, they're both founded by Alessio Gag, and I think with Formula One as well, I think Formula E, in its interesting dynamic, has forced Formula One's hand, in the sense that Formula E has the exclusive rights to be the FIA's only all-electric single-seater world championship, I think until like 2036 or something like that. So Formula One, I think Formula One will have to go down the hydrogen route. I think later down the line, a lot of people tipped at the start that Formula E had folded within the first 5 seasons. It get absorbed into Formula One and we did the end of it. Whereas now I think it's proven it's worth why people believed in it early on, even when things went wrong and you had to swap between cars and it wasn't always as simple as it probably is now. I think now it has that situation of Formula One is taking those lessons from Formula E. The fact that we're going into a lot more potential city centre locations with Formula One, like in Miami. I joked that Miami basis, to be honest, just reminds me a lot of a Formula E track, because it has that close connection between the fans. Literally, they'll be round the corner for them in the middle of the city. You're not going to have to go out. Like, I love Silverstone to pieces, but unless you live in that area, it's a pain to get to. Whereas,
and a pain to leave as well on race day. Oh my God. Getting out on a race day.
Oh, I've been stuck in more traffic jams there than I care to remember, but it's that frustrating thing. Whereas I went to the London Prix last year, literally round the corner from the in the Excel Centre, my hotel was round the corner from it, 2 minutes to walk home, could get there on the tube back and forth if I wanted to go out later on. And it was just so easy and so much more convenient, and it allowed that close connection. We were literally sat at one point in the grandstands watching it, and you were maybe a handful of meters away from the cars. Whereas in Formula One, I was even in general admission, a lot further away in the car. It felt like that distance was physically and kind of emotionally between the action. I think with Formula E now and Formula One, they've both got to take those lessons from each other and adapt to it. I think there's such a potential for growth of Formula E, whether they can harness it and get the coverage that it deserves, because I think it's so often overlooked. Whereas like with Formula One now, if you look at the televised figures, I think more people watched Abu Dhabi than watched the Super Bowl last year.
Wow.
And that's Formula One has a potential massive area of growth in America. If they can harness that, they're on the path to success, whether it'll bring other series along with it. Like say Formula 2, for example, that's had a massive or significant amount of growth over the past few years compared to, say, the GP2 days. So I think it's exciting. Motorsport seems to be on the up, and I think that was partially to do with how it dealt with the pandemic, because it was able to continue racing through it. It didn't have to stop and start so much in the same way. Once it got going, it got going.